Welcome to Sell Like You, the ultimate sales podcast that will teach you how to make sales your superpower, transform your mindset, and in doing so, explode your sales beyond your wildest dreams. I'm Harriet Meller, and over the last 17 years, I've helped hundreds of top companies around the world, including my own, make more money and qualify more leads using simple strategies that work. In this podcast, you'll learn how I generated over 10 million in annual sales, along with the sales techniques, processes, and tools that will work for you to generate more dream-aligned clients and scale your business beyond what you thought was possible. If you're sick of the boring, outdated, and pushy sales tactics of the past, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, Belle. Welcome to the Sell Like You podcast. Thank you for coming. Where are you right now? It looks like sunshine behind you, but I'm not sure.
Do you know, thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to join you. So I am actually in Bucharest in Romania. I tried to get the Wonder Woman room, but I ended up with Catwoman instead. So I'm tucked away in a little corner in the office. So if all of a sudden I look up, it's because someone's waving through the glass to me. But yeah, I'm in Bucharest.
And if it's Wonder Woman or Catwoman, they're ready to fight. Like, we just never know what might happen on this call. Yeah, powerhouse women. I think it's very, very fitting for you, Belle. So you've been in the tech industry, I think, pretty much your whole career. And I loved meeting you when I was a reseller, and you were part of that channel play, and following your journey, and then seeing you then go to Singapore, and now you've changed roles again. I think this topic is certainly very fitting about, what makes salespeople top salespeople, what's those real differentiators, and how can we strive for more? And I think really just giving us a bit of insight in terms of the role you've moved into from channel, and maybe start there, and we can pick apart some of the insights from there.
Yeah, perfect. So yes, I started at 20 years old in a reseller, and I haven't left the industry, and I haven't left channel until now. So really progressed through a very, very typical type of progression, and then got the opportunity to apply for a role in Veeam in Singapore, to really, I suppose, broaden my experience, because I loved being in the Australian channel. I love the networking in the Australian channel. It's like a high school. Everyone knows each other, or a small town more. Let's not go high school, let's go small town. So then moved to Singapore and really got to learn more about not just, all of the different cultures and how the channel works in different countries and all those sorts of things. So that's been fantastic. And then I kind of just got to that point where I just felt like I wasn't really learning as much as I wanted to. I wasn't feeling, I suppose, exceptionally challenged. So I wanted a new learning experience. So that's when I reached out to, I gave a lot of notice. I kind of said, hey, I'm going to need to put my hand up soon for something. And then organised a meeting with the leader and said, hey, what's coming up? This was last year. We were in the middle of FY24 planning. And so I said, with all the changes, Veeam, as much as we've become so much bigger, still is quite entrepreneurial in the way that we approach things and the way we kind of look at, if we, someone's got a great idea, let's look at it, let's explore it. So I asked the question, is there anything that potentially could be fitting for me? And our CRO said, well, I want to build out this global function for SDRs, and I think you'd be a great fit. And yeah, it was a very defining moment. And straight away I went to, ooh, what is that? I didn't say that to him, because obviously that would have showed that I wasn't listening the whole time during the sessions. But, just sort of said, well, what is it? Like, what skills do you think that I bring to the table that would mean that I could do this role? And what do you think I really need to learn so that I could understand completely what I was getting into? So I wasn't too concerned about what the SDR function was. It was more about what are the skills, and, what am I bringing to the table, and what do I need to learn to be able to do it really well? So it was pretty amazing time to make the change, and actually was really quiet about it. So we actually did that and created the function in a project team for 3 months before we actually announced it at our kickoff last year. So it was, a very interesting experience.
Yeah. And so interesting, you've shared there that you had this idea for taking this role, not necessarily taking this role, but looking for something else. But one of the questions you asked about, what are the skills and what do I need to bring to the table? And I think that's so self-reflective of somebody that's been in this industry for a very long time. It would be, you could quite confidently, or I would assume you could quite confidently say, yeah, I got that. Like, I could do that. Let me just turn my hand to that. Where do you learn that? Like, where does that come from of what do I need to learn? What skills can I bring to the table? Is that something you've always done, or is that something that you've evolved into during your years in the industry?
So it was actually one of my mentors very early, probably a mentor actually, who was the mentor that I reached out to. Generally, I'll have like one core mentor, and then I'll maybe have a couple of different people that I also work with. So this mentor I've had for must be coming on about 7 years. And he was the one 7 years ago when he first started mentoring me, said to me, for any future role, it's a really good idea to kind of put down, what do you have today? What do you need to learn? And how can you learn those skills in the role you're in? So that when those roles become available, you can say, here is what I don't know, and this is the things that I can do to actually learn that. And so it was something that he'd always instilled in me, and I've always shared that with other people to say, whilst you're in a role, think about what you want to do next and what could you be actually developing in yourself during that time in that role. And so that and then I met with him just before I went to this event, and I said to him, I know I really need a challenge. And he said, do not leave without contacting the leader and saying, have this conversation. Because I did kind of go, well, it's me that wants the change, not them. So they owe me nothing. I should just, it was a really interesting moment to be thinking about actually. And he really encouraged me to say, no, go and have the conversation. So yeah, when I had the conversation with John, and it was my first instinct was, okay, so what don't I know? Because I hadn't thought of this role. So what are the things that I haven't already thought about and started planning for? So that was just really helped me understand whether I was capable. And I understand what you say, like after so many years, you'd think the confidence would be, but I don't want to just walk into something and not know what I'm getting into. Like I was fine getting into not knowing what SDR was, but I didn't want to get into something where I wasn't and they weren't fully aware of what my skills were and what I did need to learn and what was the path for me to learn that as well.
Yeah. And so at that, senior level, what does that learning pathway look like, or what has it looked like for you?
Oh, it's a little bit like jump in and hope you can swim. And then looking around for people. So what I found was, and this was probably some of the best moments for me, was a CEO actually very early on created a chat group and added a CFO and a COO and a CRO, and actually messaged me and said, separately, and said, Belle, I created that chat group so that you have support. He said, so please use it. If there's anything you need to put it in that chat group so we can help you. I just thought, I was blown away by that. I get that I've gone up a level, but I didn't expect that support. I don't know why I didn't expect it. I suppose because I hadn't been exposed as closely to our CEO. But even if I put something in a chat group or any meeting, he'll reach out to me separately. Can you explain that to me? Like, what do you need? So it's really, I think it's on them that they were actually so invested in the SDR role. And I think personally invested in me being successful in it as well, because that comes hand in hand. If I'm not successful, this could fail. So they made the decision to choose me for it. So I think that has helped so much, like being very, very invaluable to have their support.
Yeah. And it's amazing as well, what happens when you get that direct support, or when you get that additional step of, or the additional access that maybe you didn't think you were going to have. And then you're like, whoa, like I just got given like the keys to the castle here, of that access. And I think, and I don't know how you feel about this, but like I found in my career that I don't really care about famous people. Like I'm like, all these famous people, no problem. But if I meet like a CEO of a company that I followed for a long time, or if I meet, somebody that has been in that business world, I'm like, do you know who that is? And, and I get really geeky about it. And I'm just envisaging this message and being like, screenshotting it, sending it to your friends, like the CEO just messaged me. That would be me. So I think it's that appreciation as well, isn't it, that goes with it?
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, what I learned was actually sharing that with a few people in the team gave them the confidence that it wasn't just I was supported, but they were supported. So as I was working with the project team to build the team and hire people, knowing when I told them how much support we had, it made them feel more confident that it was okay if we failed. It was okay as long as we called out and we asked for help and all those sorts of things, that it was okay. So that is probably something that I share whenever someone gets a little bit like, I don't know if this is working. I go, we've got their support. They want us to try things. They know that this is not easy. So, it's been amazing to have.
Yeah. So what is an SDR function then? What does that look like in Veeam?
So what it looks like in Veeam is we traditionally, like last year, what we had was marketing leads going directly to inside sales, and we had some other inside sales associates who were touching very low level leads. So it was a little bit like if it was a good lead, it would go to a salesperson. If it was more of a low level lead, it would go to this other group. And so we engaged Forrester in looking at best practice. What should you do? Like, what does a really good SDR function look like? What it looks like for us is a totally separate team. So all of the SDRs sit within one global team. We've got about 206 globally, and they receive all of the high quality leads. So we actually changed also our lead function. So we don't now do funnels where we just get, different levels of leads. We only will take the leads that are what we call hand raisers or highly engaged. So there's a strong intent. And so the premise of it is the higher intent leads will convert better and convert faster. So we really spend our time on those. We also added the element of this team having a part of their role which is about prospecting. And prospecting for us is two things. It's customer expansion as well as net new prospecting. So this group also, we will, if we at the moment are looking at, okay, we've got customers on certain licenses that we now have a SaaS service for. Let's actually reach out to them and talk to them about, would you like to step up, upgrade into a new service? It's perfect for an SDR to do that, that type of prospecting into your installed base. So we kind of do both. 75% of the role is addressing those marketing signals, and then 25% is the prospecting. And the difference is that each SDR, and I don't know how normal this is. I mean, again, we use Forrester, and I know every company does it quite differently. Each of our SDRs actually are aligned to sellers. So we have at the moment 1 to 2, 1 to 3. So the leads they get are for the sellers that they're associated with, so that they can actually build out that partnership with the seller.
Yeah, so they become like their own little departments. Was that the goal?
The goal, yeah. So it means that what we thought about the pooled model. We thought about just all the leads go into a pool and whoever gets them first. What we decided very early on is no, that is actually not going to work, because a seller needs to feel confident that SDR can call into their account because they know the account, they have the knowledge, they feel comfortable with it. And so we decided we'd do more of a one to few relationship, and that definitely was the right decision.
Yeah. Because I was going to ask the question then about, how do the salespeople feel about their database or about their customers being called back into, essentially. And so again, and it's very interesting there that, you've highlighted that the salespeople need to feel comfortable. And I think a lot of the time, businesses create these often siloed approaches for, they do outbound, and then when it comes in, it then goes over there, and then they're responsible for that, but they also need a clip off that. And in a lot of, especially technology, you've got 4 or 5 people getting this clip when no one's really done anything. And I always find that rather amusing and interesting, maybe at the same time.
Yeah, I find that the most successful SDRs are those that work with sellers who are engaging and are willing to actually work really closely with them. We actually do a lot of best practice. So we'll get a seller and an SDR to do, a discussion with everybody else about like what makes us successful. And I found it really interesting. One of the calls we had, one of the sellers actually said, every time you call into my account, that's currency. So I need to feel comfortable that you're not wasting any of my currency in being able to call that account. Because if you call in and you are not successful, if you screw it up, I can't call in again for a certain period of time. So they were very adamant that they actually did role play. They listened to their SDR. They made sure their SDR was good before they let them loose. And I totally respect that. I think that is the most perfect relationship. And that is one that, we'd say to everybody now. It's like, you've got to have a weekly catch up. You need to feel confident. You need to tell us if the SDR needs more training, then feel free to tell us. Like, we will organize it. You don't have to be the one to do it, but you are the one who will be able to recognize that that's needed as well.
Yeah, okay. Because I guess then there as well is you've almost got the salesperson turned almost like a mini manager for that SDR in some way, shape or form, or a mentor if we want to kind of not necessarily give it that manager title. And then that development question. So awesome, that's covered. What has been the most challenging elements of bringing in that SDR to a salesperson? What's been most challenging there?
I think what we also, from a best practice perspective, I did actually speak to quite a few different people in different companies about it, was we were told that it's also good to have a mix of experienced people and also look at bringing in people first role. Right. And so what I do find is we do a mix. So we hire grads, we hire people that have been in other roles and have done similar, but not in this industry. We've taken people that completely it's their first job. So probably the biggest challenge has been to actually remind experienced sellers that everyone's got to start somewhere. And that's probably the part that you get some sellers who actually started the same way and they are amazing. They really invest the time. Other sellers that have forgotten how they started, they are not so keen and they want someone who's already seasoned. They can trust them. They don't want to go through the process, which I started in, a very junior role like that. So I really embrace it, but it is probably one of the most challenging things. The problem with also employing people in first in career, early in career, is they're trying this out. And they don't always like it. So you've got to be ready for the turnover. And so we do bring them in and try to put them into a space where it's not going to be as impactful if they decide this is not for them.
Yeah. And what does that look like?
So we do have like more of an SMB area that we can put them into and have them start really softly. Don't have to necessarily really engage a seller up front until we work out whether they're in it and they're staying. Generally, we really, really hire for attitude, self-motivation, all the things that you've really got to think about, because you can't just go, what experience do you have? You've got to be more thinking about what type of person is it? So that's something that's been a learning curve. So in the initial stages, we definitely had more attrition than I wanted until people got used to what to look for. They were so used to only employing for experience. So that was something that we really had to change.
And what you mentioned there, that, you're looking for that attitude and that self-motivation. And whenever I've done sales recruitment, we've always, talked about the things that you can't teach. So, the way that often the way they've been brought up, the way that they've been shown, the world, a lot of that is very difficult to undo. But I mean, we can teach them how to structure a phone call, but I can't necessarily teach them, values and that attitude and that, positivity and things like that. It's very difficult to get that in there. What would you say is the key difference if we couldn't see the person, you didn't necessarily see their CV? What do you think stands out from someone that's just started versus a seasoned professional?
I think what stands out for me is how comfortable are they, building rapport? How comfortable are they to, engage in a conversation? Their curiosity factor to me is huge. Whenever we do like a session, the last time I was here in Bucharest, we ran a whole session where we got people to stand up and talk about some of their successful, wins. Some of the biggest ones were persistent and curious. So they were curious enough to they were constantly looking for the right person, the right conversation to have. They really want to learn about the customer and what would be the right solution. And then they were persistent. It would take a couple of months to get through, but they would keep trying until they found somebody. So that's it's hard to look for, but I think you can ask the questions of them that would bring out that curiosity and whether they would have that perseverance. we also talk a lot more these days about making sure that they really also can cope with a bit of change, you know, like how receptive are they to it, or how much will they bounce back from rejection or change, or if, you know, if they had to move from one seller to another. So it's definitely something that it is really hard to interview for, but if you know that's what you're looking for, you'll look for the cues and you'll ask the questions that will actually bring those cues. So that's what I see in our best SDRs, is just that perseverance, that ability to bounce back, the curiosity factor, the more idea of, I'm just calling someone, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, they hang up on me, who cares? Or if they tell me off, who cares? You know, like they don't have that fear. They have that more curiosity over fear.
Yeah. And you mentioned there some of the cues and the questions that you ask. Could you give some examples?
If they haven't had experience, we will kind of talk to them about, you know, talk to us about in some way how you've had to really persist in something. Like, you know, you wanted something. So how did you actually ensure that you got it? And you actually can see that just in how they apply for roles and how many roles they apply for. And do they just apply on email and never online and never follow it up? You know, there's very simple things like that you can ask that shows how much do they want something? How hard are they willing to go to get something that they wanted? And so it's having that. I suppose that also comes down to hunger as well, because SDRs are sellers, right? Our SDRs have a target, and the target actually, it has to get to the point where the seller is comfortable putting it in pipeline for them to get recognition. So they have to be hungry enough to know that I'm going to get paid only if the company sees that this is a real opportunity. So they have to have that sales mindset as well.
And interesting, you know, you talked there about the hunger element. I mean, I've applied for jobs, you know, especially back in the UK. Look, I've been pretty lucky in Australia where everyone's been like, hey, like Harry would be great for that, you know, for that role. But I know in the UK I would apply, but I would ring them. Like every day I'd be like, hey, do you have feedback? Where are we at? What's going on? I'd find someone else to reach out to. And I think there's so much to be said for that perseverance. And there's a way to do it without being annoying, but there's the same thing relates back to sales, doesn't it? That we can, you know, a lot of the time I talk about an 8 touch point outreach. So a lot, you know, if I'm looking at the pipe drive or, you know, some pipeline in another system, I can see, you know, you've emailed them, you've rung them, and you've done nothing else. So what about that? You know, there's so many other things we can do. And so I just chuck in a number because the average is 7 to 15. So let's choose 8. That feels pretty achievable. And then it's then about finding those different ways to show up and be relevant and be front of mind, using that mindset, as you said, as to like, what's the worst that could happen? You know, I'm a human calling a human with a reason that I believe is big enough for me to pick up the phone and speak to you. And, you know, at some point we'll find some way of engaging. But for now, let's just get to know each other. And I think that's really interesting, that perseverance level, because there's certainly, I think that level there gives you then that insight into who they're going to be when they're on the phone with you. And if you see that up front, you're like, I like that. I want that in my business because I want you to do the same thing for me.
Yeah. And it's also the other extreme of it is in SDRs, there has to be a process. And what I do find is we also need to make sure we're employing people who understand that. I get a lot of people who just go, we had one who would have been amazing, but they're like, I just don't like that I have to follow a process. Like, I thought it'd be more free. I could just do this how I wanted to do it. And so the other element for us is actually making sure we've got someone who understands this is going to be structured. When you make a call, you log the call. And you have to do a cadence. You have to make a call. And if they don't answer, you send an email. And then you get an alert to say, call again. If they don't answer, you send an email. A lot of people that are good sellers don't want that structure. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want a Salesforce hygiene. So it's also finding that balance of a high achiever who is still understands that they just need to trust the process. Because I get that a lot. I get, well, this works for me. Okay, I get it works for you, but it doesn't work for the company. Like that, you can't do it that way. I need you to do it this way. So it is a fine line. I did find that a lot of people that we had previously when we created the function, we obviously, you know, had people in roles that were still very similar. So they stayed in the team as SDRs. And then we had to like hire another 50% of people because we decided it was going to be a really big team. some of them just didn't want to stay because they're like, well, this is not how I've always done it. And we're like, well, now it's all about global consistency. We're a large enough company. We can't have you doing something differently to everybody else. It doesn't work that way. I've really got to the point now where if I can't see it, it didn't happen. So if they say to me, but I am making numerous calls and I'm contacting and I'm doing emails and I'm doing everything, I'm like, if I can't see it, if I can't report on it, it didn't happen. And so there is that structure that a lot of people can't handle. They just don't like it.
Yeah, and I love that. If I can't see it, it didn't happen. Scenario, especially for such a large team, as you say. And, if you've got 3 SDRs and a couple of salespeople, it's easier to kind of log in, have a quick look, or be like, yep, they look busy and they sound like they've been on the phone all day. But there's definitely a difference between that being a number on a sheet of paper that you can look at globally versus something, and you actually just being in the room and being able to hear them at the same time. And what would you say then in that realm where we're talking about that tracking process? Because a lot of great salespeople will say, I don't need to follow that. And they may be great in their own right. But how do we like, were you going to say no to them if they're amazing, but they're not going to put the details in Salesforce or HubSpot, or are you saying we're going to help you on that journey? Like, how do you do it?
I learned a lot. Like, I thought that I learned so much when I was in Singapore working in APJ, that I learned everything that I needed to know about the different ways that people in different countries work. Oof, I have learned all over again working, because we have hubs as well. So that's why I'm in Bucharest. Like, this is a huge hub for us. What I've learned is you need to bring them into the conversation really early. So we're doing a lot of investment in AI tools. So one of the reasons I'm here at the moment is we're actually rolling out lead data automation in the next couple of weeks. And we've been rolling it out for quite a number of months, but we're about to do the most significant rollout. And so what I've learned is those that are very good, and I want to keep them, but they're the most disruptive when it comes to not wanting to have a process, I just make them part of the process. So, and then if they have a suggestion that's not going to fit, I can explain to them why. Like, there's a lot of them that kind of like, oh, well, I think we could do it this way. And then if I show them, the Salesforce doesn't have that capability, or lead data doesn't have that capability, but this is what we do have. How would you make this work? They are a lot more engaging. And I've learned that they're also the ones that are the ones that are the most successful, that the other SDRs, as they join, are following. So I need them on site. I need them to be bought into the process. So I do find it was really interesting. One of the leaders here in Bucharest the other week, before I went on leave, I had a call with them all and I said, guys, I really need you to do this. And they're like, pushing back. And the next day, one of them called me and they said, you do know that if you just told us to do it, we'd do it. It's because you asked us. Like, we'll do it. And I'm like, okay. So I kind of, you have to change your language a lot. It's not, why aren't you doing this? It's like, working through why, and then the how, and then, I get all the time, well, what's in it for me? Like, not everything has something in it specifically for you, but I do have to try to find that denominator. So it's really, that's what I love about it. Like, every day is different.
Yeah, and it's a constant, because essentially you're a sales manager for 200 people. Which is insane. But you're navigating this, and I think whenever I talk about managing, it's you're like the mum of the team, because they bring you all. I think as salespeople, they're emotional. There's they wear their hearts on their sleeves. They want the pat on the back. They want the I did this and this is what happened, and they want to be seen to be doing great things, especially when they're really passionate about the business and about the product or service that they're selling. And now you've mentioned, obviously, you're in Europe right now. What's the challenge, or what's, I guess, really the experience been of crossing over different countries, continents, language barriers, in an SDR function? What's your experience been of that?
It's interesting in that, I rolled out something a couple of weeks ago, and the results in one geo were far better than the other geos. And my boss is like, why is that? And I went, I don't know. They just listened, and they just went, oh, I'm going to do this. So I've worked out, I can't, like, nothing's really predictable. So I can't just say, well, it worked last time, it's going to work this time. So I actually have to really be conscious of any conversation I have. And really, the cultural aspect plays a huge part, especially here in Europe. I find that, I came into this going, okay, so all Germans are very direct, so I can be direct back with them. Oh, no, you can't. No, I learned very early, like you can't come in with assumptions of what you thought about their culture. You actually need to ask the questions. So my first visit to Bucharest, I failed. Like I totally failed. I thought, I've got this. I've worked with Indians, Japanese, like all the different cultures. How different could it be here in Bucharest? And I totally failed. And so the next time I came, I organized coffees with a bunch of the different leaders first. And I sat down and I also researched their history of Romania. And I did a lot of research on what makes them tick, what's important to them. And that just made a huge difference, a huge, huge difference to be able to talk to them about, okay, from a cultural perspective, this is what I've learned. Is this correct? And so it made me change how I do speak to them, especially in group settings. They love to hear from each other. They love success with each other. So I was supposed to come, I think in July, I was here for weeks. I think I left and then I came back and I was supposed to run a session. And I actually turned around to the team leaders and I said, you guys run it and I'll be a guest speaker. And it was the way to do it. Like they just love to learn from each other. So it's really just making sure that it's not about who gets the floor. It's not about who gets the platform. It's actually about like, who are they going to really kind of listen to? Because if I tell them, they'll do it, but they'll do it reluctantly. If their leader shows them the way to do it, they're more inclined to actually kind of go, oh, that's great. I'll do that. So I can't pinpoint one thing. It is a constant learning for me.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really good point because you can go in and assume, you can say, I've worked with other people in that country or a similar country. But I think then, like, as you said, when you ask them and when you get them together, and this is what we find, we do a lot of one-on-one and we do a lot of online coaching and training with teams. And the most successful engagements we have are the ones where we get to have FaceTime with the team before we go into here's our 6-month engagement together. Because when the business says, we've got this organization coming in and this is what they're going to do with you versus, hey, I'm pretty sure that I'm coming into this meeting and none of you actually want to be here or none of you really understand what I'm here to do. And you think, oh, just another person's tell you another thing about what you already think you do. And, you're hitting target or whatever the things are. And actually, I'm not here to necessarily change very much, but I want to share with you some ways that I think will make your job easier, make you more effective, give you more time back, but also help you make more money. And if any of those things resonate with you, let me know. And they're like, yeah, well, I want that. I don't have to work as much, or I want it to be easier. I want to earn more money. And when you can connect those dots as to what matters. So again, coming back to that with them, but in those early stages, we can connect the dots. And sometimes you might have to try something you don't either know or trust or believe in yet, but just trust me because everything else I've shared has worked. So if then this, if going off my track record, and are you willing to maybe give this one a go as well? And I think trust plays a huge part in that of let me listen to you, let me learn from you, let me, give that a go as well.
Oh, you're so right. Like that's why I spend weeks here. Like I don't just fly in and do meetings. I'm on the floor and I spend the time. Like I'm here for 2 weeks. And then one of the biggest things we did as part of this group was we actually opened up a new hub in Costa Rica. So we'd never had an office there before. So we opened a hub there. And so I spent a week and, just making sure that I understood them as people. Like that's just a totally new thing again, right? So it is actually, you have to get to know them. And that's my leadership style. I couldn't handle just being a fly in, fly out and no one. But even when I come here next week, when I'm here, the EMEA leader's here and him and I just walk the floor. We come every end of quarter and we just make ourselves available. We just hang out together in the office. We walk the floor. We talk to people and it's not constant meetings. Like the door's open. We have a meeting room if you want to come and chat to us. And I think that really works because you've got to remember these generally are younger people as well. So they're really looking to learn. They don't have a confidence issue with like coming in and just chatting to you, or half of them don't. They're not worried necessarily about your title. They actually are really curious and are happy to kind of come and have a chat. So it's very, very, very different to managing seasoned professionals.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I think, I mean, the title of this series is around, what makes salespeople great. And I guess often, using the book of, good to great. But, what makes them good, what makes them great. And you've talked there about curiosity. But I think the other side, which I didn't know the way this conversation was going to go, but I think a lot of what you've highlighted there is about what makes great salespeople are great leaders and people that believe in them and people that give them that time and dedicated opportunity to reach out, to have a minute, to ask a question, to be listened to, so that you can say, have you considered that? Or, how about you go and sit with that person and they had the same issue. Why don't you reach out to them because they've overcome that? And bringing those together, it's not necessarily you having to be there and have all the answers, but knowing that who will connect with who and who will bounce off who and who's been through something similar will connect those as well. And I think often we don't look back at the leader. We look at we've got these great sales managers and they've been there for a long time and they've been in the business a long time. And now it's the sales people that have to make this next stage work. And I think you've just brought out an entirely different conversation piece around that leadership element of really showing up for them. And I guess to stay on that tone, what do you think would you agree with all of those? Is there anything else that you would add in there that makes a great manager or a great leader, or that you've seen have a big impact?
I think it's going to be willing to have those difficult conversations. And I have the curiosity. I want to learn. I actually, currently speaking to professional coaches. And so I think it's about kind of emulating what you're looking for as well. So, I'm the sort of person that if I meet a person, I want to ask 100 questions. Like, I'm curious about everything. And so I think it's just making sure that what you're looking for in those people, you're able to display yourself. I didn't need to know how an SDR does their job day to day. Like, I didn't need to have done that job to lead this team. I've now learned it because I am the sort of person who, when I went to Costa Rica, I wanted to teach them some of the things that they had to learn, because I feel like if they can see that I can do it. But again, you don't need that for more senior people. These are junior people that are like, okay, well, if she believes in it. So I think it is just having a very different style depending on the seasoned or the experience of the people that you're leading. Because these people in this stage in their career, money is exceptionally important. And it's not money like you and I to buy our fifth property, jokes. It's actually money to survive, right? So it's money to put food on the table. And the other thing is career development. They really want to know that they're doing something that actually will have a future for them, and they want to know that it has some sort of purpose. So the role itself, it's not like we're saving babies, but it has purpose in the sense of what their future career is going to look like and what skills they're going to learn in doing this role. Very engaged about what our policies are around, diversity and inclusion. I think some of the new people, some of the younger people are the most active in our diversity inclusion groups. So they really want to know that we're not just saying it, we actually give them the time, and, we make an effort to really embrace what diversity inclusion means and how they can also embrace being who they want to be in their role. That was more relevant, that blew my mind probably more so in Costa Rica, that they're very open about how they live their life and everything, and want to be their true self at work. They don't want to be a different person at work. They want to be who they are, and they want to know that they're supported. So those sort of programs are, it's quite interesting to see how much they've really embraced those programs as well.
Yeah. And, you've mentioned at the beginning, you just mentioned there again about coaches and mentors. And I love that because, I obviously, we offer that to a number of salespeople that we work with. And I'm seeing an increased drive in self-funded mentorship investment, coaching investment, which I'm loving. Because I remember I bumped into somebody not that long ago, and I remember the very first business course I went on. It was probably about 10 years ago, if not longer. And I remember it was about $450. And at the time I was like, what am I getting for that? Like, I wanted the world for that, that amount of investment, because I was like, I'm giving money, I'm giving time, what is that going to look like? And then I remember my next investment was about $25,000 for the year. And I was like, done. It was so the polar opposite of what I was going to get and how I felt about that investment. And now seeing people come, and obviously I feel extremely honored when people reach out to me directly and then say, look, I've seen you in this environment, or I've seen you do this, would love to work with you. That's amazing. But I think then from that leadership element and from that growth perspective, you mentioned you've had them. So I guess really what made you go and get a mentor, and what would you say is important when looking for a mentor for others out there, maybe considering going out to get one?
Yeah, so I think I do kind of, when I start feeling as though the worst thing is half the time when I remember, it's when I'm drowning that I think, oh, damn it, you haven't reached out to your mentor for a while. Like, you've got to be a bit more regular about it. So I mentor people and I make sure that they're regular. I just probably don't do it as much for myself at times, but that's what I'm actually organizing at the moment. So it's actually making sure that you look for someone that you can engage with. And I also, as I said, have had sometimes 2 or 3 at the same time, but for different reasons, for different skills or different things that I'm really looking to learn about or to be able to talk about. So maybe there's someone who is a bit more removed that you feel like you can have different conversations with that aren't so understanding of like the industry you're in or the company that you work for. So I definitely have consistently had a mentor now for 7 or 8 years, but it was something that I didn't do early in my career, which I wish I had. I took up the offer early in my career for one of the programs that the company I worked for did, and they matched me with someone who just was not the right match. And I think it just gave me a bad experience. And then I just went, I've got no value out of that. I'm not going to spend my time doing it. And then eventually kind of went, these are so valuable, but you need mentors, coaches, and supporters. So I find that a coach definitely will give me something very different around a specific area that I'm looking for. How do I actually deal with this situation? Like, I want you to coach me on how to have a different perspective on something. Mentor for me is probably much more about personal, it's hard to describe exactly the difference. I think you're nodding, so you know the difference between a mentor and a coach. And you can articulate it a little bit better than I can. But at the moment, I'm having conversations with both. Like, I'm talking to a coach, a mentor, and I'm actually also about to talk to a consultant who actually will work with me on looking at deep diving into the business and looking at the different parts of the business to actually say, how could we even adjust ourselves a little bit more to fit in the business? Because I'm looking at it from my siloed world, and I am actually, marketing and sales, we are like in the middle of those two. That consultant is actually going to help me really understand a little bit more about some of the countries that we're in. How could we kind of do this a little bit better? So I do think about different times, like, what are the challenges I'm facing? Are they business, personal? What are they? And then who is the right person that I should reach out to? The coach one's a bit new for me, because normally what I would do is, if I'm struggling, I jump onto podcasts, I jump onto books, I do all those sorts of things. And, that really helps. It really gets you out of your head and gets you to understand exactly kind of, okay, this is fine, right? Take the emotion out of it. This is what's happening. But yeah, definitely highly recommend coaches, mentors, and supporters. The project team that we built to stand this up have become the people that I surround myself with now. Like, we're in this together. We still meet once a week. Even though they all have different jobs, it was a project, we still meet once a week to see, are we on track? And they're the ones I can go to say, I'm worried about this. What do you think? Like, they get it more than anyone else, even though they're not intimately day-to-day involved.
And would you say as well from that piece to then say, hey, I just want to let you know, like, we just did this, like, we just completed this? Because sometimes, I find this in a business is that I'm like, who do I tell? Like, I just did this great thing. The dogs are very interested usually, and I'll give that information, but again, it's somebody outside of the team, so then I've got to wait for my husband to get home, and then I'm like, this is what we did today. But I think having people that understand, what you've been through and what the goal was initially, and how does that look, I think supporters are a great one because they don't have to necessarily be something super structured. But, can you celebrate the wins with each other? I've got a couple of friends who run businesses and we get together. I mean, we're friends first and we run businesses second. But we get in the car and she's like, what's your peak and pit for the week? And I'm like, oh, I love this. Like, let's talk about it. And that's how we're going for a wine and we're in the Uber and that's the first thing we talk about. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. 'Cause it doesn't need to be work or mentorship or coaching, but it's just having people that you can relay exciting things that you're doing in your job, in your career, in your business, and share that with them as well. Yeah. So final question for you. So you mentioned there about books and podcasts. Anything you want to share with us for what has transformed your mind or giving you a different perspective throughout either recently or throughout your career?
Probably, I would say, actually, a light bulb moment for me is, it is typical. All the things you go through, everyone else goes through. So when you read a book, you go, shit, I'm just like everybody else. It's okay. Like, that's the thing that I'm really discovering at the moment, especially going up a level in the organization, being at a different table than I was before with different people. I read things when I start struggling. I look for articles. I look for things to do. And it's like, I have to remember that it's okay that I'm stereotypical. It's okay that what I'm going through, thousands of other women have gone through. That's why they write books about it. And so I think that just understand that what you're going through, others have, and you can learn from that. Don't try to be different. Don't try to go, no, my experience is unique. Like, actually learn from other people and understand that you're unique as an individual, but what you're going through is very, very normal and very similar to what others have gone through. So learn from others. That's probably the thing that I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And do you find like female in the industry, do you find that you want to learn from more females, or do you feel like you get enough from, regardless of whether they're male or female, sharing their experience?
To be honest, I probably now am tending more towards looking at learning from other females, more so because of my age and what, from an age perspective, what's happening in my world, so that to me makes it easier because there's things that I, am learning that is happening as a 51-year-old that I have to then transform that into my work life. So having someone who can kind of go, that's normal, that's okay. And then knowing that actually, being able to manage those different things that I'm also dealing with and the different elements. I think that's where working with women actually really does help for me. And I love that, just being able to kind of go, okay, it's okay. Yes, your brain's like everywhere. That's normal. Okay, this is how you focus. This is what you can do. So yeah, it definitely probably is more women at the moment.
Yeah, incredible. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing the insides and what you've been working on. And like I said, I mean, I've loved getting to know you. I've loved, watching the journey from LinkedIn. That's definitely, my viewpoint. But thank you for sharing, your experience with those SDRs, what for you makes a truly great salesperson. And letting us look at the management side of things that helps salespeople be even greater. So thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
No, thank you, Harriet. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning into the Sell Like You podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and be sure to subscribe to never miss another one. A huge thank you to Vitality House for hosting today's recording, and I look forward to being back into your ears soon.